It's the water fountains at the dog park.
Right. They're all covered in plastic and tape and all that other stuff.
Okay. See,
Are
when
your little dogs masks, Cliff?
when I
Pardon?
talked to the
The
other
little
mayor,
masks for the dogs?
No.
when I talked to the other mayors and I go, well, my question was about water fountains at dog parks, and I hear about what they're dealing with, you know, we're in a great city. And I think that probably was done, Cliff, when the county did the order to stop all water fountains in parks, and nobody thought that was a dog park. Okay, you know, you just send a crew out saying cover them. And I'll check today and I'll text you back.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Don't worry.
No, Michael is busy allowing people in that layer of security, the waiting room. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. So welcome, Senator Pizzo is here, but we're going to wait a few minutes for some people to log on because we always have about half a dozen people log in late, so they're still coming in.
All right, let's see. So Ron Silver is on. Hello, Ron Silver.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hi,
Hi.
And let's see, our Sunny Isles Beach Commissioner, Jennifer Vizcarra is on. Jennifer, hello, hello.
Hi.
They're kind of
Is Elaine, is Rick on?
Rick Chisiver,
Yes,
are you on?
I see him on my agenda, but I
Yes.
don't see him on the screen.
I don't see him yet. He's
Yeah.
not here yet.
He hasn't logged in yet. Give him a minute.
Hi, Elaine.
Hello, hello. Marcella, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good.
Good.
You too. I'm back.
You're
After
back.
my mom said I'm back.
I love saying your name. It's like a song. Gomez Bogomoni. Gomez
You got it.
Bogomoni. I got it down here.
Okay, we have a song. We have a song.
I know you do. I know you do. But just your sound.
Ela Gomez Bogomoli. I love it.
Alice, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you too, and Enid.
Oh, Alice Birch. Hello,
We should talk.
Really?
We should talk. I have some information about Doctor's Charter.
Oh, good.
It's good stuff. It's good.
I will call you.
Okay.
Oh, and Jeff Levinson is on. Very nice. Cheryl Henney. Very nice. Our new Aventura Police Foundation. Hey, hey. Jeff Hurt again.
Jeff Levinson, where's your camera? There you are. Okay. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
And Chris Wenger from First Service is on now. So our two sponsors are on. We're really kind of waiting for, we got one more minute for, oh, Stephanie's on too. Hi, Stephanie. Where's my Stephanie Trump?
There.
That doesn't look like Stephanie Trump. That looks like Ron Silver. Okay. We're just kind of waiting for, yeah, he has one more minute to log on. Rick knows us. When we say 5 minutes, we mean 5 minutes, right?
Sorry, Elaine, I was on the other phone.
Oh, hi, Stephanie. Hello.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Stephanie.
Good
Good afternoon to everybody as well.
Hi.
Oh, and Phyllis Smith. Okay. Zoe. I did. All right, Ollie, just go to your phone. Oh, okay, then I gotta go. We're on. Okay. Okay. Bye. All right, Michael, you're still letting in people?
Yeah, there's a couple more people coming in right now.
Okay. There's Alex Lama, another commissioner.
Hello, hello. How are you?
Hello, hello. How are you? You're in a car, right?
Yeah. I'm not driving though. I'm not driving. I'm parked. I'm being responsible.
Right.
All right. All right, Elaine. A couple more people coming. There's Russ.
Oh, nice.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hi. How you doing? Good. Good. Thanks.
Good.
Yes. Welcome. All right. I think, Elaine,
I think we're gonna
we're
start.
ready to go. Okay.
It's 12:36.
So,
Oh my goodness.
all right. So everybody is muted. We have about 38 people. Probably get a bunch more. Please use the chat box if you want to correspond with either me, Elaine, or the senator, or anybody else for that matter. And throughout the meeting, we will try to address the chat box. Welcome, everybody. This is a very special program. For those of you who've been here before, Senator Jason Pizzo is absolutely wonderful. He gives us so much information. I'm very excited to hear what he has to say today. With every day things changing, he keeps us up to date in real time. We don't have to watch the news. We can pretty much get it all here right now. With that said, let me turn it over to Mr. Pyatt, the chairman of the Marketing Council. Gary, all yours.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for setting this all up, Michael, with everybody. And yes, good afternoon. For a special program we have today, I am Gary Pyatt, AMC Chairman, and thank you again this week. It seems like he gives us his time literally every single week, but thank you to our Florida State Senator Jason Pizzo for attending this afternoon's meeting and give us an update. This is our Law Committee meeting with our partners, the North Dade Bar Association. Everybody needs to understand that normally this is a special day because normally these law committee meetings are usually only for attorneys and judges. But to this time today, we've opened it up and extended it out to all members of the Aventura Marketing Council and everyone from the North Dade Bar Association. So really quick, what I'd like to do, as I said earlier, I was looking for him on our screen if he's in here somewhere. What I'd like to do is turn this over for a second to welcome everybody to Rick Chisever. Rick, where are you?
I don't think he's on, Gary.
Well, then so much for Rick's introduction. All right, he had a moment of glory, Michael.
Yes.
So you want me to go right to the sponsors then, Elaine?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So today we have two sponsors for today's program. We have Janet Henfield Green, who we know very well for years and years for the Marketing Council, and we have Christian Wenger from First Service Residential. So what I'd like to do is give us an introduction first. I will turn it over to Janet Henfield Green.
All right.
Good afternoon. How's everyone? I want to welcome everyone. I'm Janet Henfield Green. I'm the Aventura Market Manager for now Professional Bank, formerly Marquee Bank, with over 3 decades of experience in commercial lending and private banking. Owners trust me to provide customized solutions to complex problems and to grow their business. Our success comes from collaboration with professionals locally, including accountants, attorneys, and consultants. So we've most recently merged with Professional Bank, and together we are a stronger bank, and we're very happy to now be able to offer additional services to our local market. So please contact me if there's any need that you have. I'm located in Aventura.
Perfect. Thank you, Janet. And if you would, I know we've become very accustomed to this, but everybody uses the chat room to post their contact information. Senator Pizzo already did it. So Janet, if you want to do that, just post your contact information in the chat room and everybody will have it, okay?
Sure, yeah, you can find
what
my
I'd like
contact.
to do to our second sponsor for today, and thank you very much, from First Service Residential, is Christian Wenger. So Christian, I see you. I went to the second page on my screen. So please, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself and welcome everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little loud today because, of course, it's Murphy's Law. The landscapers just started at my house as I'm about to go. So if there's a little bit of background noise, I apologize. But I am, as Gary said, with First Service Residential. We service over 15,000 residents right here in the South Florida area. We have our home offices very close to where you are in Hollywood, Florida. as well as our corporate headquarters in Dania Beach. So we, service our clients from a broad spectrum of HOA communities, as well as high-rise communities, low-rise, mid-rise, all that good stuff. We're really excited to hear what Jason has to say today about these legislative updates. We're actually very active as a property management group in Jacksonville, or I'm sorry, in Tallahassee. We work a lot with the legislators to educate them on potential impacts of the legislation and how it affects our condominium associations and the communities that we partner with. So we partner with Travis Moore from Moore Relations, and we're very active, like I said. So we're really looking forward to this. We always love to educate our board members and pass the information along. So if there's anything we can do with any of the communities you work with, let us know and we'll be happy to help out. Thanks so much for letting us sponsor today, Elaine and Gary.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I was just, when I was listening to you, I was going through the chat room. So please post your contact information there as well. What I would like to do now is just turn it over to, I did see her on TV with the various mayors yesterday. There in regards to masks, making masks mandatory, but I will turn it over for a few remarks to our Aventura Mayor, Enid Weissman.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, Senator Pizzo. It's good to see you. I know you've been busy. I don't think there's been a moment of one day that you haven't been in and out of Tallahassee or preparing food and serving food to the homeless. We got very lucky in Northeast Dade when we elected Jason Pizzo as our senator for Senate District 38. Jason's like part of my family. And if he was a creep, I would tell you all he's a creep, but I want you to know every cell in his body gets it. He really understands our community. He understands the political environment. He understands the social unrest that we've been having. And I think I could really put my hand on the Bible and say, I don't think he's seen 2 hours of sleep in the past 6 years because he's constantly at work. It's a wonderful job. I can't tell you how proud I am to have you as my senator. And with that, I think it goes to someone else. And if you haven't met them, he's got the 2 cutest twin boys on the planet, blonde, blue eyes. So please, Jack and Julian, give them my love.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I will turn it over now for an introduction of our Senator Pizzo. And I will turn it over first to Kristen, and then when she's done, Jeanette. Thank you. So Christian, go ahead. Maybe. Christian, there?
She was here. I think she got frozen.
I don't know what happened. I don't even see her on my screen.
She's on the first half.
There she is. She's on the first half. Here, she just spoke before about first service. She just spoke. Something happened with her.
Oh, I'm so
Christian,
sorry.
you there?
I'm here. For some reason, I was having issues with my camera.
All right, perfect. So it's all you for the first part of the introduction for Senator Pizzo.
Oh, yes, Mr. Pizzo. So thank you for being with us today. I'll go through, Elaine, and I'm sorry, I was just having some technical difficulties over here. So I'm trying to pull up your information here.
We could skip the intro. I can just say hello. We can go right into it if you want.
That would actually be helpful. Okay. Welcome, Senator Pizzo.
Well, wait a minute. You don't want to hear that Jason had a very wise man for a father? His father's mantra was do
exactly.
well,
He wants
so
to skip all that.
Skip it.
Elaine,
I saw him for
about,
Father's Day, so we're all square.
What about Jeanette? Or Jan, where's she at? She's somewhere here?
I have a cute little story.
Oh, give us the story, and then we'll let Senator Pizzo take over. How's that?
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm very excited to introduce Senator Pizzo. The first time that we met was on a very similar forum. Well, we were at Live. It was at 800 Degree, the grand opening. It was an event with Aventura Marketing Council. And he introduced himself to me And his introduction was, my name is Jason, and I'm the assistant to another representative that was sitting right in the front of me. And I went with it until they introduced him as the senator. So since then, I've gotten to know a lot about him. Everything that they've said is so true. We're very, very lucky to have him representing us. And I have a few other things that I want to add. Not only does he have, again, the support of our great community, but he has a wonderful sense of humor. That's something that everyone should know. His Senate district is one of the most diverse in Florida, with 15 municipalities, well over 500,000 constituents. His district 38 stretches from neighborhoods of Overtown, Liberty City, and Little Haiti to the coastal communities of Golden Beach and Aventura, as well as Golden Beach, all the way down to Miami Beach. His legislative priorities include modernizing our aging infrastructure and government services, curbing gun violence, restoring economic security, protecting home rule, and ensuring equal dignity and rights for every resident in Florida. Jason serves on several Senate committees, including Criminal Justice, Military and Veterans Affairs, Finance and Tax, and Community Affairs Committee. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gary, who will introduce Mayor Weissman has some additional remarks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know Michael is going to be operating the chat room. So if anybody has any questions, please go to the chat room and Michael will moderate that. That being said, I will turn it over to Senator Jason Pizzo for an update.
Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here, and I see a lot of familiar faces and friends. So what I'd like to do is, based on who the audience is today, it's sort of sparking some information, some legislation, some current events, and all that stuff. First, I gotta say hello to my mentor, my godmother, Enid Wiseman, who I love very much. Hello. And my favorite Trump family. I see Stephanie Trump. That's my favorite Trump family. Not to be confused with any other. So let me just jump right into it. I have the chat open if people want to fire away with questions, but I kind of just want to give you a general idea of where we are. Our legislative sessions are 60 straight days, as most of you know. They don't always fall in the same period of time. So this year they were January through March, slightly extended into to March 18th. And then this coming year, with committee weeks, will then follow session, but it won't start till March. But obviously we find ourselves in rather extraordinary times, and I appreciate all the accolades and compliments and all that stuff, but it really is an honor really to have the family and resources to be able to do this full time. As Senator Ron Silver, I see, is here, the sort of joke is that this is a part-time legislature, but it really, if you're doing it right, it's absolutely impossible. It's an absolute full-time job, and I have the infrastructure and the support personally and professionally to be able to do this full time. So we find ourselves in the situation that we're in, and then Miami-Dade finds itself as its own sort of separate carve out, like it does a lot of times in statewide issues, because of higher concentrations of either positive cases or our geography or physical plant structure. So let me just tell you from a state perspective down, we are still playing sort of catch up because of cautionary tales that we're seeing. And I just want to give you, I'm a science and math guy even before I went to law school. So let me just sort of lay it out for you. We are going to see a sharp increase in the number of positive cases. The Florida Surgeon General and I speak on a regular basis. What we really have to be mindful of, and a lot of what I'm going to tell you is sort of, rhetorical, and you know this already. Look at hospitalizations. Even Mayor Jimenez had admitted, based on a small sample set of about 750 to 1,000 random selections of antibody tests, that the actual number of individuals in our 2.7 million person county of population, we probably had anywhere from 12 to 15 times the number. So, your neighbor to your left, your neighbor to your right, either was positive at one point or knows somebody that was. But again, look at hospitalizations. That's really the benchmark, not the increased number of cases. I will tell you, you may find it to be sort of conflicting or to be confusing sometimes, but as Mayor Wiseman alluded to, our session was over March 18th. I was home for a few weeks, And then the unemployment system really just failed and was just not operational. So instead of joining 159 other colleagues from the state and the Senate, sending emails and angry phone calls, I just decided to pack a bag and drive back up there. And Maggie, my right arm, and I, we spent 44 days in Tallahassee. And I can tell you successfully, we were able to successfully process thousands of applications for our constituents. Janet had mentioned how diverse that our district is, and it really, really is. You may academically understand and appreciate some of the things and sympathize of the differences and deltas in our community, but my Senate district spans as far west as 27th Avenue on the west side, where we've had 3 young people killed really in the past week. Just situations and circumstances that would just not find themselves in eastern parts of my district. And yet there are headwinds as they relate to a number of issues. And my biggest concern really as a whole broadly for the district, for all 15 cities, continues to be and always was infrastructure. We just got off a call with Key Biscayne residents as it relates to infrastructure, sea level rise, sargassum, seaweed, and all that stuff. So there are a lot of moving parts, but what I want to stress to you really is the following. As we begin this reopen, it's not something that maybe a lot of you are familiar with. Some of you are by necessity. I know Vice Mayor Svenson's on here, Commissioner Vizcarra is on here as well. But sargassum seaweed is a big issue for us for tourism and any kind of reopening and rebound. And we've sort of been at the forefront with that. We have great connections with USF. Now the West Coast and the Gulf has gotten a lot of funding, $3 million a year for the next 6 years for red tide research. And we're asking for some parity on the East Coast, because my district is Golden Beach, Sunny Isles Beach, Foul Harbor, Surfside, and all of Miami Beach, asking for some parity on funding and attention given to sargassum on the East Coast. Just to give you an indicator of how serious this now is, and we've been pushing and nudging, tomorrow, Dr. LaPointe from Florida Atlantic University will be meeting with me all day tomorrow. He's filming a documentary on sargassum for the Florida Chamber of Commerce, which is typically and historically a more conservative sort of Chamber of Commerce, but that's good news because that means that it's being taken seriously, and we should expect some kind of mitigation effort and some buy-in on a bipartisan or nonpartisan basis, so to speak. A lot of other, on a commercial interest level, a lot of hotels have reached out to me. And the reality is the snapshot evaluation that's taken in January is really nonsensical when you look at the loss or complete decimation of revenue as it relates to the months of March, April, and May. And what, right before this call, I'm connecting later with the Office of Policy and Budget, the governor's office, because while we're not in session right now, we may be going back for a special session. Of great interest are 2 Florida statutes, 193 and 192, and they deal with property appraisals. And what I'd like to do, and what I've suggested, is perhaps take the January 2020 snapshot on a number of your commercial properties, and then sort of give some forbearance by taking a blended average when the snapshot comes for January 2021, combine the two and take the average. It would seem to make sense. If you had a property that's tax exposure was $1 million with the 4% discount due November, I would like to take 2020, which is obviously in the rear of trailing, comps that happened the year before. And the blended average makes sense for the following reason. When our commercial entities are paying property taxes, those projections and the anticipation of that revenue to the county and to the cities, is anticipatory for the goods and services provided by those local government entities. And so I think it would make economic sense, because my degree in finance came before my law degree, that if company X has $1 million tax exposure in 2020, and they're going to have what they believe to be, let's say, a $500,000 tax exposure for 2021, I think it behooves everyone and inures to everyone's benefit to take the blended average, which would be $750 this year and $750 next year. That would prevent a huge reduction in services provided by government entities and also allow for the planning of such, because otherwise you're going to have a number of things that were adequately funded this year and then a complete cut and drop off of austerity next year. And I think we lessen the blow by taking that blended average. So I'm going to be speaking with the Office of Policy and Budget, the governor's office, to try to get that into effect. What we were able to do early on, and I brought it up on the floor, I don't think I was presaging anything. I think it was on people's minds, but I just wanted to articulate it, memorialize it, and I've reached out to a number of you on this issue, was when we were up in session on March 18th, sales tax revenue was due March 20th. And I plainly asked on the floor of the Senate to the Appropriations Chair, Senator Bradley, whether or not the state was prepared with the reserves on hand to be able to allow for some extension, not forgiveness, but some extension or forbearance on the payment of those. The situation we found ourselves in was I was getting calls from shopkeepers up to large car dealerships that said, listen, with the closures and the executive orders that are pending and now enforced, I can't pay people and I can't make this month's payroll. And I said, well, if you were able to extend the payroll taxes and the sales tax that were owed March 20th, would that float you or bridge you at least for a month while people were figuring out EIDLs, PPP, SBA loans, you know, all things of that nature? And the overwhelming answer was yes. So I'm, as I think most of you know, I'm not shy about getting to the alphabet soup up in Tallahassee. And I spoil my district by bringing them down here a lot. So we've had the Secretary of FDOT down here. Last week, Gary and I were on a call and I brought on Halsey Bashirs, who many of you met when it came to Aventura for the Department of Banking Professional Regulation. And so I got on the phone with Jim Zingali from the Department of Revenue and I said, listen, can I offer businesses in my district some extension? And he immediately said yes. And it was simply sending an email saying, you know, to be able to retain the sales tax and payroll tax for March would be huge for our entity until we figure things out. So they're really, the worst someone can say is no, the way I was raised and the way I was taught. So there's no risk in asking. And obviously we're not in a vacuum. So if you take from Peter, you're going to be taking from Paul as well. And so there are ways to figure things out and to get us through how vital things are. As far as a legislative update, last year, as many of you recall, we took a little dais, Representative Geller and I, we went over a number of bills, good and bad, however, what your position was. This year has obviously been very extraordinary and strange in the sense that a lot of bills carry a fiscal component to them. Now, just like counties and just like your cities, we take projected sales tax revenue and other revenue streams that come to the state budget of $93 billion and allow for or commit and obligate ourselves on a legislative level to the budget and to those services based on what we anticipate sales tax revenues to be. And if you saw the April report from March, we were $880 million in the hole from previous projections. Although we did have some unanticipated bonuses that came from February sales when all of you were running out to buy toilet paper. So that actually was an artificial blip on the sales tax side. But objectively, we're going to have far less revenue than we did last year, and more importantly, that we anticipated having and projecting for this year. What does that mean? Well, as the session ends, the governor receives bills that were passed from both houses and they're basically drafted and presented. And every day I get an email from one of two people in the governor's office detailing which bills he's received and which bills he has signed. And a number of us selfishly obviously have bills that we've passed and we're waiting to see if he's going to sign them or not with the blue Sharpie. In this year, anything really that's new that has a large or significant fiscal component to it is probably going to suffer the veto pen. And that relates sometimes not just because the governor disagrees with the policy behind a bill or something that we passed, but really the fiscal, the cost of enforcing and executing that new piece of legislation. It also means, unfortunately, with the loss in revenue, that we simply don't have the money to be able to accommodate every single funding request. And as many of you know, because a lot of you ask me from a city and county perspective, when I go up to Tallahassee, to ask for funding for particular projects. I know Tony Diaz is on this call, and here's a perfect example. Hilda Tony Diaz operates the Humane Society of Greater Miami, and we were able to secure several $100,000 for that wonderful operation that she has, but that's a local member project, so to speak. So you have 120 representatives asking for money for their cities and 501c3s, and 40 senators asking for the same. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap. But those are some of the things that are likely we should expect to be cut. Also, other programs that have received a lot of funding should also, anticipate that those funds being rated. This year, we're finally able, finally able to secure the Sadowski Trust Fund that Senator Silver, I'm sure, remembers from 1992, setting aside a portion of dock stamps that go into a fund for affordable housing to the tune of over $300 million. Things like that will also be rated. One of the objections I had, and I'll stop being so loquacious after this, we'll take questions. One of the objections I had is the state had offered a $543 million refund to the state's largest corporate taxpayers. I don't philosophically object to it if we had planned for it, but the problem is that the deadline on that was the beginning of May, and that was returning a significant amount of money to a large number or a number of entities that were large employers and continue to be large employers. I just thought it was prudent basically to hold off for a while on that one, not saying that we wouldn't give the money, but as many of you I'm sure have read anecdotally, the unemployment system we have in Florida is horrendous. And the delivery and disbursement of money, not only of state funds, but we're also the dispersing agent for federal dollars as well, has been slow and anemic to say the least. And it's what we've been principally focused on because a number of you obviously have been affected. And so when Disney calls me and says, we need your help because we laid off 43,000 people and the funds aren't getting through in hotels and restaurants and bars and all kinds we've been helping everyone from nail salons to Disney. To try to process these payments by an unnecessarily complicated system. That's something obviously we have to revive. So we should expect what is in an immediate snapshot to be a bit of austerity based on the lack of revenue that the state has or the diminished amount of revenue the state has based on those services. And really, at this point, I just want to open up to questions, anything in particular. I put my contact information on there because there are a number of bills that may be academically or philosophically selfish to you individually, personally, or things that are professionally important to you. And I'm happy to take those and treat those on an individual basis. But again, they start just to trickle in, and the bulk of those bills that have been received and signed really have been taking place over the past 10 days.
Senator Pizzo, there's a couple questions in the chat room. Do you want to read them or want me to read them for you?
I got it. We'll take them. Okay, so if I can just, I'm going to take the bottom and go up if that's real, and I can fire off answers to these if that's okay. Elaine asks, hold on, I got emails coming in that are blocking that thing. Asked about, I saw the word camaraderie and in our nation, more or less among legislators in Tallahassee. Yeah, I just did a piece for The Guardian, and I really explained how this is really a bipartisan thing. It's not on a partisan basis. It's not fun to be a Republican right now in the state legislature because you have an executive branch run by Republicans, the Senate and the House run by Republicans, and a judicial branch that leans right, except their own constituents are equally suffering from unemployment, food insecurity, housing insecurity. And so it's not popular to speak out about it. And I do shift the blame majorly on the prior administration, governor's administration, than I do more so on this one, about a system that basically just failed. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. This is the Goldilocks period for us to take care of and to amend a lot of bad legislation going forward. I think we can do it on a bipartisan basis. There's still outliers. There's still people that want to be on the cover of a magazine instead of actually talking about policy behind the scenes. I'm not one of them. I don't have pride of authorship. I just want to get things done. So, but yeah, I think a lot will get done in the future. There's a question about PPP loans and forgiveness. I know a lot of you maybe understand that we went from 8 weeks to a 24-week schedule as well. I'm happy to take those questions. I like to do those offline because I don't want people implicating themselves. I've done a number of Zoom calls where they're like, oh, I got a PPP loan and I'm collecting unemployment. And I'm like, let's talk offline. Obviously, these are recorded. I don't want to implicate. If you have questions about PPP, EIDL, SBA stuff, reach out to me individually. My email is up there on the top as well as my cell phone number. I'm happy to walk through all of those. Brian Van Hook from the Small Business Administration has been very helpful recently as well. So we have those resources and we can get anybody on the phone at any time that you need. That's the greatest perk of this job. Commissioner Phyllis Smith says, what is your opinion on cameras for all police officers? Commissioner, if you're referring to body worn cameras, I'm a huge proponent of it. I think it diffuses, obviously it records a lot of situation, but I think it helps both parties. I think that we have too much disparity between areas that are completely under surveillance and other ones that are not. And I think that a good, clear conscience and pure of heart and soul really should have no problem. A number of things that we propose in situations like this, the dynamic is only somebody who's anticipating committing a crime or doing something bad would be uncomfortable being in full view. So I am a huge proponent of body-worn cameras. I have been for a long time. Legislative changes from Cliff Schulman. How are you, sir? From legislative changes for Chapter 718 and 720. Yeah, they're coming, and that's also a bipartisan issue on here. Secretary Bashir's joined us on a call last week, as I said, with Gary on a property management perspective to talk about, some of the little fiefdoms that happen in condos. As we know, we get a steady stream of condo complaints. The emergency powers for condos has ended. And so where you can reasonably accommodate CDC guidelines as far as social distancing and sanitizing and things of that nature, the condos no longer really cannot be their own sort of government, so to speak, and restrict the use and enjoyment of their facilities. But again, we should see 718 amendments on a number of things. Just to give you a quick little anecdote, many of you recall that we did a meeting with Secretary Halsey Bashir from the Department of Banking and Professional Regulation, who has governance over the 4 million plus condos in Florida. And based on that meeting that we had, a large law firm that was defending a condo in Boca Raton decided to use as their defense the fact that we held a town hall meeting with the secretary, and because someone came to the meeting and complained about their condo, that should be considered an ex parte communication and the condo should win by default. And the legal fees at that one law firm going to that 72 unit, $520 a month condo assessment structure was $200,000. So the abuses are just rampant and awful and completely unjust. And we're seeing where discrepancies of $400 and $500 are leading to $15,000 and $16,000 legal bills, which is going to end. If I get nothing else done as a takeaway from legislation, it's going to be that the little guy doesn't keep getting bullied by these things. And that was just really the straw on that one. And I circulated and disseminated the transcript from the hearing that said Senator Pizzo and Secretary Bashir held a town hall in Aventura, and because these people complained about the conditions of their condo, we should win. And we should be awarded a couple $100,000 in legal fees. It's absolutely extraordinarily awful. And it's part of what has to change. So the secretary is aware of it, and now we have buy-in because he was named individually as committing something that was untoward when in fact it wasn't. So, do you think South Florida open up too early? Jonathan asks, playing Monday morning quarterback in retrospect with new COVID cases spiking up to 4,000 daily for the last 4 days, do you think South Florida opened up too early? No, we're not seeing anything that we didn't anticipate. And to sort of memorialize that, if you go back on my social media from 2 months ago, probably 2+ months ago, I pegged the number of deaths anywhere from the 2,200 to about 6,100. And so we're actually right there at that midway point. We are exactly where I thought we would be. The unfortunate reality is, as with a number of other conditions and issues with comorbidity, with closeness and concentrations, we don't have subterranean subways like I had in Manhattan when I was going to NYU in Columbia. So we get the benefit of that. I think there's also some inconsistencies as it relates to what opens and what doesn't. I personally believe the beach is safer than a grocery store. One's essential, one's not, but for the form of recreation and just clearing your head, I think, closing a beach, as you know, you have to read between the lines. Sometimes when things are closed, they're closed not because of the immediate residents and those that live there that have access to it, but other extraneous or unfamiliar people coming in. But we are a service industry region. We have 3 8-hour shifts of service. I don't care if you're a bartender or a member of the Florida Bar, if you're a hedge fund manager or you're washing dishes. We're a service-oriented region. This is what we are. And, it's a large part of my job description to remind my colleagues in Tallahassee that may come from inland areas of Ocala or Gainesville or Tallahassee or the Panhandle of how big of a donor we are as it relates to sales tax, what draws. You know, cold Canadian snowbirds are not dreaming about, you know, going to other places other than our district. They read about Aquilina being, you know, so highly rated and going to Miami Beach, a place like that. And that's what people dream of when they're freezing their butts off in cold February, you know, mornings. They're like, oh God, if I can go sit and sip something on a beach. And so we should be doing what we can to make it accessible and not to close it down and say, no, you can't come. I mean, Disney has been early on their new reservation system, how they're opening up, and they're moving ahead, and they're not stopping for July opening. So no, I don't think we open up too early. There is, as you learn early in law school, there is a societal and community balancing act, and it's really what society is prepared to accept. And the easiest example that I give is the following. The speed limit on I-95 is that balance. If I told you that we could reduce the speed limit on I-95 north and southbound to 10 miles per hour, I can tell you objectively, and you would have to agree, that fewer people will be injured and fewer people will die. That's the bottom line. If it was a 10-mile-an-hour speed zone on I-95, fewer people would die. But the majority of society is not prepared to have a 5-hour commute to go 20 miles. And so there becomes a balancing act of what we're prepared to accept for efficiency, for the stream of commerce, and so on and so forth, and what amount of injury, death, and other circumstances we're willing to accept. And that's literally how you get a balancing line. And so you can't disagree with that. So when people ask me, oh, you know, you're a bit of an expert on criminal justice, you know, how do we solve, you know, crime? I said, put everybody in jail, which is, I'm being farcical and obviously flippant by saying that, but we would have no crime if nobody was outside. And so I can tell you, yeah, if everybody stayed home and nobody did anything, we could lessen the blow. I just don't know that before a vaccine comes or other solutions come, that's really plausible, because people in March went from frustrated to desperate in April and May as it relates to food security and housing insecurity. And so at some point, I will tell you, when I have single mothers that tell me they want to end their life, when I've had people tell me that they walked into oncoming traffic and unfortunately the cars veered away, when I have people telling me they can't afford their chemo appointment the following day because they haven't gotten unemployment, people start to worry less and less about exposure, about other risks, because they get a sort of desperate cabin fever that you know, what wouldn't you do to feed your children? And that's the situation that we find ourselves in. So as far as opening, you know, no, is the short answer to that question. I think we could have done a lot of other things sooner. Michael, am I missing any more questions?
Elaine just put one in recently. Should law enforcement is being disrespected in many parts of our nation? How does Florida compare?
So before I did this, I was a prosecutor for violent crime. I handled a lot of the shootings, well, most of the shootings that involved kids. That was my job. So it took me to Homestead, to Overtown, Liberty City, to Miami Gardens. Anywhere where a minor was shot was my case. By design, I wanted those because that's the largest disconnect between the community. And you know, we have nationwide, there's a culture, especially in the urban core, about no snitching, about, you know, not participating, all that stuff. But, and I do this as an exercise, and I like to do it every time that I have a group chat, and it's the following. If I could ask everybody on this Zoom call, when you were growing up, did you know the neighbor that lived to the left and to the right of you? And the majority of you were gonna raise your hand because you did. And they knew you, and they knew your family, and they knew who was supposed to be over your place and who wasn't. And you could knock on their door, and there was a sense of community. And even today, with obviously you're on this call, then you are overweight in your civic engagement. So you probably have a greater propensity to engage with your neighbors. You have to admit that you don't have the same intimacy with your immediate neighborhood and community that you did when you were younger, at a different time. And that same dynamic is prevalent as it relates to the communication and trust level as it relates between law enforcement and the community in the areas most in need. Now, if you have an area that has a very low crime rate, you don't meet with the idea or the presence of law enforcement in the same way that a 15-year-old black teenager does in Liberty City, because there has been a different kind of disconnect. And it's societal, and I could talk for hours about this because I lived 100 hours a week doing this, but there is, if you want to characterize it as disrespect to law enforcement or the bad apple scenario and all that, and then there's cries for what's called defunding the police. I am not a proponent of defunding the police at all, but I do think that there are interactions that occur that could be otherwise or more efficiently used from a different division or a different branch or a different style. I also think the training is far different. Most of us knew some police officer growing up, either by family or friend or community, and today that same kind of relationship doesn't occur. And I make a number of suggestions as it relates to training and exposure. Every one of you on this call should take me up on the offer to go to your local police department, give them a copy of your driver's license, and sit in the passenger seat and do a ride along. People that are really interested and really engaged in this idea and really passionate about it should exercise their right to do so, to go sit as a passenger. And the best time to do it is a Friday and Saturday night shift from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. And make sure you buy the guys donuts and coffee and watch and see what happens. We have the ability to do real-time monitoring to learn for ourselves and to learn from them or to engage in that conversation. And we could flood every single passenger seat of every single patrol car in Miami-Dade County anytime you want. And I do it a lot. It's a fascinating exercise, but those kinds of exercises are necessary. I think kids when they're younger and police officers when they're training need to engage more. I threw out the wild idea that maybe cops should pick up some kids and drive them to school to sort of foster relationships when they're training. But we need to re-examine. It happens everywhere. No city is immune. People remember that I was a prosecutor, so I get phone calls from people that get arrested and think that the arrest was wrong. And a lot of times they're right. And it happens in every city. And when I say every city, I mean every city that's on this call. It happens.
There's one more question that just came in. I don't know if you could see it.
Commissioner Viscara asked about hospital stats and status. Can we sustain with rising cases? So I have a daily text chain that goes out to people that I know that work in the ICU at 4 different hospitals. So right now the answer is yes. We actually have a glut of equipment, not on site necessarily, but available. I'm not worried about, I don't want to highlight the fact that no, we're good. We have plenty of equipment, because that suggests that we are going to have a lot of people that are going to need that equipment, which is a bad situation to be in. But as far as an equipment basis, yes. You recall that a large ship entered California, that we set up a satellite hospital, the county did, and all that stuff that was not used. So on an infrastructure basis, as it relates to treatment or to accommodate people, the answer is yes. I certainly don't want to be in that situation. But yeah, we can sustain the rising cases. Aventura residents and businesses are constantly bringing food to the Aventura Police Department. We're so fortunate to have such a great involved police chief and department. Absolutely. Folks, this is a rather unique time, and here's what I mean by that. We did the largest food drive that FarmShare had ever done early on. We did it, I think it was the first week in April. It was the largest day. We had 3,600 families that we served, and we did it out of Golden Glades. And it wasn't 12-year-old late model Toyota Corollas pulling up with missing hubcaps. There were Benzes and Beamers and all kinds of cars. And this is an extraordinary time where people that were living well and living high, all of a sudden were not. And there's a social contract which is what drove me up to, or made me drive up to Tallahassee for the following reason. There's a social contract that we were asked by your government entities. They were federal and then state by executive order, and then county and then cities, and still feeling the vestiges of some of this. But the burden was stay home and be responsible for yourself and for your neighbors. But the reciprocal benefit was to some extent that you were going to enjoy some services efficiently from the government for doing so. And the state failed on that. We really have. Objectively, by any standard, the state has failed on the distribution of those. And it's created a situation where people become very desperate. Now, I am as guilty as anybody else for benefiting from the Amazon Prime, Instacart, Uber Eats, instant everything, I want it now situation dynamic that we all enjoy. And so this was the first time that people, a large number of people, I mean, over 1 million people were applying for benefits for assistance that had never touched or asked the government for anything any time in their life. And so people who were doing $2,000, $3,000 a week, all of a sudden were finding that they were trying to navigate a site and get in line for something that a lot of them admit after we helped them, they have a different perspective on this now. These were people that voted for or against programs or people that stood for assisting people in the community that needed it. And now they're like, wait, I'm completely rethinking the philosophy around this, when they realize that if things are running perfectly and efficiently at the state level, it's a 21-day wait. And this is the first time several 100,000 people, and many of whom that you guys know by extension, by 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, many of you are friends with or family members with people who were doing really well and had the Chanel bag and were on Instagram and sitting on top of a boat. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, just like county, city, and state and federal governments, the projection and anticipation of what my revenue is going to be personally is not there and is dried up. And what provisions can I do? And the state really has not efficiently delivered those services. And remember, they are the dispersing agent for the federal dollars that came as well. So the system needs to be redone, and that speaks to a bipartisan buy-in on doing that. So school reopening from Vice Mayor Larissa Svensson. So have you been talking to MCAs about school reopening and how it will affect the very different schools in your district, some with more resources to get the school sanitized, but it's supposed to pick up some of that burden a lot of district resources. This is yet another example. It's an excellent question about the disparities of physical plant and structure, neighborhoods, PTA meetings, and resources of local municipalities. And this is where I certainly don't want to walk into a self-fulfilling prophecy where the accommodations made for certain kids in public schools or other schools are so objectively different than they are for others. And this is where we need to make a very conscious and deliberate treatment that every child's life, health, and safety are of equal and greater significance than our own. And those accommodations have to be such. And so that may require any number of things. I know a lot of schools are at capacity and a lot of them are not. Mayor Wiseman knows what I'm talking about. Our Booker T. Washington High School is at 46% capacity. There's plenty of room to socially distance and to provide for it. Meanwhile, Norman Edelcup, every one of our neighbors is using their mother's address and PO box to try to get their kids over there. So, we have to make accommodations. Obviously, it's the generation of greatest, import and significance. Fortunately, although we're seeing the ages drop on the average for many number of activities, still our kids, our K through 12 ages, are still remaining to be either somewhat resistant or just not susceptible and sensitive to this virus as others are that are elder with comorbidity. So yeah, that's going to be huge. But I will tell you, I assisted Rabbi Matz recently. His yeshiva extended into July, and he's like, listen, if summer activities are reopened without restriction, we would like to finish the remainder of our year. So that was something where we reached out to the Department of Education. And we were able to accommodate him and his wishes with CDC guidelines within 48 hours.
Jason, since there's no more questions, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
You work so hard. I see you posting on Facebook every day. You're constantly on webinars. What do you do to relax? Do you take time for yourself? And what is it that you do besides help out all the residents in Florida?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I have a wife who can't stand me around for too long. Let me put it this way. My dad took me to a wonderful vacation spot many years ago when I was like 12 years old. It was called Virgin Gorda. It's in the British Virgin Islands. And we're on the beach, and I remember I was like, hey, I want to try windsurfing. I want to try snorkeling. I want to try whatever. And he didn't object to it. And the reason is he had made me read an article around that time that said, you should vacation or recreation at the same level of intensity and pace with which you work. So if you're a writer, if you're an artist, your vacation should be something that is, you know, in proportion and commensurate with that kind of activity. If you're a trader, if you run, if you're having a, you know, something that requires a lot of yours, you should do something that's commensurate with it. So for me, you know, my relaxation, there's nothing, guys, my high, my drug is when someone sends me a message saying, without you, I don't know what I would have done. This morning, I paid for someone's chemotherapy who's not even in my district a couple weeks ago, and it was her last treatment, and now she's cancer-free, and she wanted to kill herself. So to say, you saved me, you helped me, whatever, it's wonderful. But this past weekend, with the Juneteenth celebration, when everyone was doing local events, I flew to Texas, drove to Galveston, went to Ashton Villa, where General Granger read Order Number 3 on June 19th, 1865, and stood there at the exact place, and then flew back. That was fun for me. That was recreation while still being able to learn and demonstrate my commitment to it. So I have 13-year-old twin boys that are, you know, they're magic. I know I'm a little biased, but they're wonderful, and a lot of experiences are vicarious. So listen, I'm lucky. You can Google me and find out. I'm very lucky. I worked really hard. Enid likes to talk about my dad's famous line, which is do well now so you can do good later. And I worked really hard when I was younger. I did really, really, really well. I don't have any bad habits. And so I can give you guys 18, 19-hour days. And the harder you work, the luckier you get. And when I have people that continue to feed me with thanks and appreciation for getting things done, large entities and individuals that have traditionally felt left out or marginalized, that's my drug.
Excellent.
So
That's very
this
nice.
isn't a job. This is a pleasure and an honor.
Jason, I just had a question come in privately. Let me go ahead and ask you that. Are there any updates on legislation, whether state or federal, to encourage insurance companies to cover business interruption losses from COVID?
So the short answer is yes. When I was up in Tallahassee, I took a number of meetings with different agency heads, and I always reference a chart. Michael, I'm gonna, I don't know if I sent you this link before, but everybody should have this. It doesn't matter where you are in the system. It's like my handy little chart I used for my last call, which is from OPAGA, and it gives the whole hierarchy of the state, and we can distribute it later if you want. Or Maggie,
okay.
Drop a link for everybody. And so the short answer is yes. So I met with the Office of Insurance Regulation. I met with the secretary, the commissioner, or director there. On a number of things. My biggest immediate concern was, you know, people were getting laid off and they had COBRA payments, and how were they going to make those if we weren't, you know, distributing that stuff. As it relates to business interruption, there are even lawsuits. Some of the largest law firms in the state are filing suit for their interpretation to get the man and the woman in the black robe to make the interpretation. But I think what's going to happen is they're going to say there was extraordinary government assistance to placate or offset what that disruption was, and that there was a general availability. Now, we know that not to be true as it relates to the state of Florida. The governor had announced a $50 million bridge loan program that was gobbled up by 1,000 entities immediately, leaving 35,000 others. And that's another issue where I said, listen, you have a loan program, and I believe that should have been a revolving line of credit. And you guys are the audience to be able to understand what I'm talking about. That PPP and EIDL and all that stuff was considered a more permanent type of financing, which would then require in the fine print to pay off that bridge loan. And I thought that would have been a nice revolving line of credit for all of businesses and entities to be able to use in Florida. And this is where I don't mind saying, this isn't sort of a flippant, sarcastic comment, but I'm finding myself to be somewhat unique and a bit of a rarity, having signed the front and the back of a paycheck in my lifetime. So there are a dearth of those. There are people who have never made a payroll. There are people who have never had to earn, whose own life and existence and success was not only that you're responsible for, but you had others and families and individuals that were depending on you. And yeah, unfortunately, it's cliche, but a lot of our government, state and federal, made up of those people who have never had real jobs, so to speak, you know, outside of a teenage summer, you know, dishwashing or lifeguarding. And so as it relates to business disruption, I think going forward, it's going to be a carve out. I think the courts are going to make some determination and ruling, I think, on some open suits, but I think it's absolutely a discussion. Here's the other thing too, and a number of you carry business insurance of different types. You know, I personally carry excess liability, but my wife's a terrible driver, so I think something's going to happen. So it's a de minimis cost for me to have such coverage. But I was looking for some forbearance for the following. Let's say, for instance, you have a hair salon and you closed in mid-March and you're able to reopen last week. Well, that time between, you know, the March and the reopening is a period of non-activity that was forced upon you. And I believe that that premium that was paid based on a risk assessment by actuaries for a period of time that's basically in a vacuum. And so if you're basically agreeing to the fact that there will be no claims during that period of time, because you should not have a slip and fall in the barbershop in the middle of May because you weren't supposed to be open. And if we can agree to that, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see people canceling things. I don't want to see people canceling credit cards and insurance policies. It's just bad for everybody. And I hate to harp on the whole signing front and back of the paycheck thing, but let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There's checkers and there's chess, and checkers is the immediate and chess is the longer strategy. While I joined in the chorus in a bipartisan fashion about food drives and eviction moratoriums and all that stuff, I'm concerned with the longer, and maybe it's because I have a finance degree, the longer term aspect of it. And here's what I mean about that. In the United States, whatever city you pick, whatever state you pick, whatever county you pick, our nation is driven by the consumer overwhelmingly. And if we have people that were not able to make rent payments, car loan payments, credit card payments, whatever, and there's a negative credit reporting on those people, and they're dropping 100, 150 points, we're so reliant on the consumer to be able to charge things, rent things, buy things, that what I've been asking our congressional partners from very early on, like really early on, put it on their radar, I'm not taking credit for it, I'm just saying put it on your radar, please, is a forbearance on negative credit reporting. Because if people's credits are going to drop 150, 200 points, they're not going to be able to buy, they're not going to be able to revive on the reopening and a recovery on all of this. And that's, I don't care if you're selling widgets or land or cars or hotel rooms, whatever it is, that's critically important. So I'm looking for a forbearance window from like March to September. I'm really looking for our congressional partners and Senate partners really in the federal houses to step up on that. That's going to be huge. But business insurance, I think is going to be a carve out. I don't think we shouldn't anticipate having another one of these. So I think on a long enough timeline, the actuaries can pen this out. The premium adjustment should be de minimis compared to the likelihood of this happening again.
Very nice. Jason, Maggie just texted me about the link. I can't respond back because I'm on the camera. You could tell her, yes, just send it to me. Please, if you could do that. Mayor Weissman twice is trying to get your attention to remind everyone to wear masks and social distancing. So I think she wants you to say, because coming from you is probably more powerful than me. Just a comment I saw in the chat room. Gladys just wrote updates on. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right, Mayor Weissman, I think you got your wish. Any updates on the credit card interest? That's from Commissioner Mizrahi.
Yeah, so on that issue, again, that's really got to come from a federal perspective. We have a good relationship with the Florida Banking Association, so I can help you with finance as it relates to, you know, in-state stuff. But again, that's the pressure, the influence, and the power of the purse of the federal government, really. And I'm not saying it's fallen on deaf ears. I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is always very accessible to me. Donna Shalala, Debbie Mergesell-Powell, even Mario Diaz-Balart. We discussed this. I actually just discussed that with him recently. Yeah, it behooves the economy and every one of us to give some forgiveness and to give some forbearance to be able to recover. Otherwise, we're going to prolong and have a protracted recovery period that's just not going to benefit anybody.
Yeah, actually, the next comment is actually very important as well. Maybe you could talk about the importance of everybody participating in the census.
Guys, it takes 9 minutes. You can do it online. I did mine online. I did a video for a couple of organizations. Every bit of the hundreds and hundreds of billions of federal dollars that trickle down, if you're believing that theory, but that come to states and come to counties and areas after disasters, emergencies, or even in the seamless operation of schools and roads and everything and infrastructure comes from the census. And so I have a large part of my district that had some concern legitimately about citizenship questions and things like that, but that's all gone. And it's kept private and basically in a vault for an extended period of time. I can't tell you, you cannot, let me say, put it this way, don't complain a year and a half from now when we have the next disaster and we find out that our response rate was 58%. Don't complain. Okay, so we get up to 100%, then we can complain because we said we have the empirical data to show what our population size and what our needs are. But don't complain. And this is what I mean. not only you and your family members, all that stuff, your employees, your housekeeper needs to fill it out. I'm not kidding. They need to fill this out. Otherwise, we go individually out of pocket and we put a strain on local resources. It's beautiful to see Aventura and Sunny Isles and a number of your, and Tony Diaz from Humane Society. I know she's been taking care of a man who's completely helpless and feeding him and caring for him. So you guys do things individually, do things as groups. But listen, there's plenty of federal revenue to take care of a lot of this stuff. Okay, and I personally had probably been $20,000 out of pocket by the middle of April when I was like, hold on a second, there's got to be a more efficient way to do these things, and economies of scale. So those economies of scale derive from a full and accurate, comprehensive reporting of where we are. And that also obviously is going to attribute to the way maps are redrawn. Some of you may not be cursed with having me as your state senator after 2022. The map's drawn a certain way. So, you know, I like all of you. So please respond so I can continue to represent you and not get carved out. So yeah, it takes 9 minutes. There's really no excuse not to do it. At this point, it's like sending the thank you card to an aunt who sent you an ugly sweater. We're so far along in the process, but there's still plenty of time to do it. So go on and do it.
Senator Pizzo, you are a wealth.
Enid's bragging it took her 3 minutes.
Yes, we'll start with Elaine. Elaine, under 3 minutes. So Enid, Elaine did it faster than needed. Senator Pizzo, you are extremely intelligent, a wealth of information, and someone before said that we are extremely lucky to have you. I think on behalf of everybody here, it was just a phenomenal hour. We are over 7 minutes. Elaine is giving me the we have to cut it off. The hook, yes. So Mayor Weissman, Gary, Elaine, any last minute questions or comments before we say goodbye?
No, just two things, and then I'll let the mayor wrap us up. I want to thank Janet from Professional Bank and Christian from First Service Residential, as always, not only entertaining, but extremely informational. Jason, thank you very much for your time today. And to a couple of things that Enid said, yes, or actually Enid and Elaine, the census, I took it on Sunday, and I'll bet it took me literally just a few minutes, and it's very quick. And as Senator said, it is so important. So everybody on this call today, if you haven't done it, please go and do it. And the other thing that Mayor Weissman said, please, as you guys know me from these meetings, I have this on, it's around my neck, I don't forget it. It's here every single day, every single meeting. Please, please wear your masks. And again, thank you, Senator Pizzo. Enid, I will turn it over to you to wrap it up.
I hope Cliff is still there. The water fountain at the dog park services both human beings and dogs. And because it services human beings, it is under Carlos Jimenez's county order, and we have no control over it at the moment, Cliff. So you and Lauren, bring your own water. Sorry I couldn't do better for you, but we get answers back very quickly here. Again, I just want to thank everyone. I can't emphasize it strongly enough. I know it's 100 degrees. I know it's 99% humidity. Please wear the masks. Even if you're not worried about you're not worried about kids in kindergarten through 12, they go home to parents and they want to see their grandparents. And the numbers are not trending well. We want to be as less restrictive as we possibly can. And I don't think we'll ever have to go back to closing if we just wear our masks. And again, that's in public places. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Elaine?
I think she said thank you, Michael.
Okay, no problem. All right. Well, with that said, thank you very much, everybody. We hope that Senator Pizzo comes back again.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Be
Stay
safe.
safe. Stay safe.
Wear your masks.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye, Senator Pizzo. Bye.
Bye, Commissioner. Bye, Senator. Elaine.
Marcella.